different things. How are we doing, Rebecca?
Nearly there, nearly there. I've got a notification saying that we're now live on YouTube, but I can't see us.
Okay.
Oh, I can.
Okay.
There you go.
Great.
Kayla, I've just popped the link in if you won't mind sending people to there for me.
No problem.
Thank you very much. So, hi everyone. Sorry for the delay in starting. This is actually our first time pushing live to YouTube, so we're still trying to figure out how that's all done. But we're here now, we're ready to start. My name's Rebecca, if you've not met me before. I've been at Urban Sketch Course since the beginning. And I have Kayla with me, who is going to be in the chat with you all today as well. And I have Ian. We also are on Zoom with our Plus members. These are guys who are part of our monthly membership and they get bonus training with us. So we've invited them all along to be part of the conversation. Those of you who are on Zoom, we would love it if you could join in. Please feel free to unmute yourselves, say hello. You're all very familiar with Ian by now, I'm sure, so you can bully him a little bit if you want to.
They always do.
Anyone who has any questions throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat box. Myself and Kayla will be around to help answer those, and we can pass them across to Ian. Thank you again to everyone for being so patient, and I will hand you across to Ian.
Thank you, Rebecca. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this live webinar that we're putting together for you. Thank you all so much for joining us, wherever you may be. The plan for today is that I am going to showcase 60 sketches, 60 pictures I have done over the last 10 years to show you how my work has developed, how my work has evolved in that time. To make this conversation, to make this presentation more interesting for everybody, including myself and Rebecca and Kayla, if you've got any questions or insights or anything that you want to say, please drop it in the chat and we'll address it, because it just makes it more relevant then, because otherwise it becomes a bit of a lecture and I'll just talk. I just mentioned briefly to the Plus members, but I'll just kind of say it again. I often get asked about this thing called style, and we all have a style, no matter what our experience is, whether we're just beginners or we've been sketching for a long time, like myself. And style is very, very personal, and hopefully this will give you an insight into how my work is the way it is now, how things have changed over the years. So you're going to see sketches that were done 10 years ago, before I thought of myself as an urban sketcher, and they're all quick and they're all black and white. And then you're going to see eventually towards the end work which is much more developed and sophisticated and complex, with lots and lots of colour. And that's the evolution of a style. And it's not a conscious thing. It happens for all sorts of different reasons. And during the next hour, an hour and a half, I'll talk to you a lot about why things have changed. Because I think the why is always important. You know, why I choose that line, why I choose that shape, why I choose that subject, why I choose that combination of colours. I think it's really, really important for any artist. So hopefully it'll give you a really good insight into why I do what I do and how it's evolved over the past 10 years. Also, I've just had a brand new book called Sketching Stories published through Urban Sketch Course. I know some of you have got them already. And I'm going to read you about 3 stories from that, which will go alongside the images that you will see. And some of the stories are funny and some of them are quite kind of poignant as well, because it's a whole range of different stories. So I'll be reading some extracts out from that. So Rebecca, Kayla, shall we start the presentation, please? I hope you've all got your popcorn, feet up, and if you get bored, don't worry, there's always Amazon Prime available for you. Okay.
There we go. Can you see that okay?
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay. So can we move on to the first picture, please? Right. So this is the first one. This was done exactly 10 years ago, drawn in Venice on location. Now, I got involved as an urban sketcher 8 years ago. So the first few slides that you're going to see, probably the first 5, 6 or 7, are before I thought of myself as an urban sketcher, because I've been making art on location for years and years and years for different reasons. These particular ones were just me going off around Europe to different places and just sketching and just enjoying drawing. So you can see from this, the line work is very loose, it's very scribbly. I'm using Tombow brush pens here, and this is probably about the first time I ever used them. And it's just capturing the kind of essence of the place. And I probably drew this standing up as well. And I still see a lot of me in this now. You know, I still, when I'm doing pre-sketches on location, so I did some last week in Bezier, I often do very quick little drawings like this. But back then, this was all I did. There was nothing else. This was a completed sketch as far as I was concerned. And it was just capturing the atmosphere. It's not going anywhere else. It's not developing anything. It's not practicing anything. It's just me on location, just loving the space that I'm in. So in some ways, these are very kind of small beginnings. So if we can look at the next one, please. This is part of the same trip. This was in 2016. And you can see I'm using hatching technique. These are all fairly small as well. I'm using black in a really kind of positive way, you know, to get that range of tone, that range of depth. So a sketch like this has got kind of 3 layers of tone. You've got the white, I'm capturing the white, which is the building over on the right hand side, the black, which is the body of the boat, and then the hatching technique is like a mid-tone in the background. So a lot of the techniques I'm teaching now are relevant in this picture, but just in a much more immediate and kind of uncomplicated kind of way. And these sketches were all I was doing. There was no thought of taking them any further. Some of them I might have gone back to the studio and maybe played around with a little bit more and perhaps added some colour to a different version of them. But at the time, I wasn't thinking about that. I was just really happy to be there. And it's like taking a photograph, but so much more powerful, so much better. Okay, you should look at the next one. So this is Ponte Storto, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous little bridge just in the kind of back streets of Venice with all these wonderful canals just weave their way around. And this has just got a little splash of colour on. So when I was sketching outside, I wasn't ready to put colour. I hadn't even thought of putting colour on at this stage. It was just really, really quick, really immediate. Pens just asked the question, how long did it take to do these? I guess they were all about 20 minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. I mean, the three that you've seen so far, I think there's actually one more. They would have all been done in one day, and I would have done more besides, you know, because I was just going around working really, really quickly. And what is interesting for me now looking back at this is I talk a lot about this whole thing about layers of looking, you know, where we look deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject. And I wasn't looking that deep at this stage. It just wasn't part of my, if you like, my style. I was just looking very quickly, very immediately. And the focus was just enjoying being there. I mean, I said in the previous slide, it was like a photograph. I just wanted to capture something about it. There was no thought of them looking neat or tidy. But what I love about these now is I can see how it's developed into the work that I do now. You know, the subject matter, the range of tone, you know, even if you look at the brickwork on the right hand side, you've got that sense of perspective, and 2 of those bricks I just shaded in with a brush pen. Well, I do loads more now, and I do hatching techniques, and vary the line work, but the early beginnings are all in these, which is why, they're quite important to me. I'm really fond of all these little sketches. Just move on to
Can
the
I
next one.
just jump in with a question from our YouTube?
Yeah.
Susan's asked if in these early sketches, if you use the same materials, so the Tombos and the brush pen and the fine liners, or if you use different materials.
That's a great question. So I'm using brush pens, but I'm only really using one or two. So I think I'm using a light grey, which you can see, and I'm using the black. I wouldn't have used the other one. So the mid greys that I use, I hadn't quite discovered them at the moment. I was using, and they weren't Tombos either. It was a different kind of marker. I think they were like pro markers. So they weren't the same, the brush pens. I hadn't quite discovered the brush pens or the Tombow brush pens at this stage. I was using a different type. Can't quite remember what make they were, but I know they weren't as good as the ones that we're all using now. And I'm using also permanent line makers, but I would have only used, it's a great question this, by the way, I would have only used, say, a 0.3. I wouldn't have varied the thickness of line. And again, it's because I wasn't trying to go for sophistication. I was just going for simplicity, just trying to really capture the thing that was in front of me.
And Melanie have also asked, do you ever look back at your older sketches and wish you could go back and redo them in your more up-to-date style?
That's a great question. I kind of do, I think. I've not been back to Venice for a long, long time, although I'm hopefully I'm going next year. And I probably will go back and revisit some of these and do them, obviously, the style that I'm using now. But what I'll probably do is pre-sketches, and the pre-sketches that I do for the students for the workshops now will probably look, well, I hope they'll look very similar to these. Because these, to me, now looking at them, are almost like the pre-sketches that I do, just working out the compositions, working out the shapes. So if I was to do a workshop of Rio San Pantalon now, which is this one, and I wanted to do a pre-sketch to work out the tonal value, the composition, even the colour, and where to put the colour, this would be almost like a perfect kind of pre-sketch. Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, the reflections at the bottom on this one, you can see you've got that big post that the gondolas are on, and then you can see how it then reflects into the water, and you've got all that ambiguity of what's water, what's post, what's reflection. I love that, and that's the kind of thing I do now. So I can see, I mean, even now in the four that we've seen so far, I can see how the style is starting to evolve, and this is probably a little bit more sophisticated than the first one that we saw of the Grand Canal. Right, now we're doing a bit of a jump now, okay? So this is about a year later, and this is me sketching on location, but these are taking a lot longer. So the previous ones were done, I don't know, 20 minutes. This would be, you're talking, like an hour, maybe an hour and a half on these. And I still haven't got onto colour. I'm still just using black and white. And I would have discovered the urban sketching community, and I would have joined the groups, the Liverpool group, the Wirral group, and other groups as well. So I would have been going out with the urban sketching group, and I wasn't actually teaching. I was teaching, obviously, I was teaching workshops, but I wasn't teaching the kind of things that I'm doing now outside. So this is where the style has moved on. It's become more sophisticated. I'm looking a lot deeper. I'm noticing the tone work a lot more. It's a lot tidier. There's a lot more kind of going on in these now. So this is a bit of a jump forward. And then this is the Albert Dock in Liverpool. So this is about 9 years ago. I had this kind of funny thing back then about putting clouds in the sky. I wasn't quite ready just to leave the white. I always insisted on putting these fluffy clouds in. And I look back on them now, and it probably wasn't a good idea because they don't quite fit in, but it was just so much fun. I'd always have to stick something in. If I couldn't find a cloud, I'll put like a little cluster of birds. But I still hadn't worked out the colour. And again, this wasn't going anywhere. This wasn't me thinking I'm going to move off in a different direction. I was just loving going around and just drawing outside. And I was still doing lots of work in the studio alongside this as well, but the studio work was a little bit different. It was more kind of constructed. And so Joni's just asked, was I selling these in galleries? Yeah, I mean, I was not the early ones, but these ones I would have started to sell. But that wasn't the driving force behind them, because running parallel to this, to all of this, I was doing lots and lots of work in the studio, lots of studio-based work, which was watercolor, and they were selling. I was selling, hundreds of those in galleries up and down the country. But this was different. This was me not being part of the commercial world and just really enjoying being outside, because I'd spent such a long time working in the studio and only really dealing with galleries and agents, which wasn't that much fun really. But this was different because this was outside, meeting people and talking about the creative side and the health benefits of it as well. So it was just wonderful.
Carolyn has also asked, was the square format your preferred choice?
At this time it was, yeah. And I did maybe 2 or 3 sketchbooks where it was a square format, and it was only a bit later on that you'll see when I started introducing more colour that I changed to the format that I'm using now. So the square format for these was great. So these are 30 by 30, and this is another one done at this time. So yeah, the square format was just perfect for me. You can still see it's got a little bubbly cloud in the sky. I don't know where he came from. It looks like a flying saucer. But this is quite a complicated view in Matthew Street in Liverpool. This is the home of the Beatles. So the Cavern Club is just kind of round the corner, and again, it's just all about sampling the atmosphere, just drawing what you can see, just loving the space that you're in. And I look at this one now, and it's almost like I'm desperate to put colour on, but I just haven't quite got around to it. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to start doing it. It's almost like I'm pushing the drawing as far as it will go, using lots and lots of tone work, capturing the shadows, I'm using all the different brush pens by this stage, I think, but I just haven't quite worked out the colour side of it. So I'm almost like on the edge of something, and I just haven't quite reached it yet.
We've had a question on YouTube saying, in the early sketches, did you face many barriers or have frustrations about what you were capturing, and how did you move past them?
That's a great question. No, I didn't have any frustrations because I had no preconceived ideas of where I was going. I didn't really know. I had no plan in my head that I was going to start moving on to something else. So at this time, I was just happy. This particular one is probably my favorite one out of all these black and white ones. And when I sketched this, for me, this was as good as it gets. I had no thoughts of introducing color, going bigger, finding more complex scenes. This was just what I wanted. The warmth of the building behind and the coolness of the stepple fountain, which is kind of a bit like the opposite way around to what you normally do. So I just love this. I love using the brush pens, building up the tone, capturing the little pops of black. And as I'm drawing them, there's people coming around and watching what I'm doing. And that was a new thing for me, because I hadn't really experienced that before, because I'd spent years and years and years just working in the studio. So suddenly having people around me and talking to me and asking me questions was great. It just felt great after years of almost working in isolation. So this is the beginning of using color. So this is on the same. This is a slightly smaller format to the other ones, and I didn't quite really know where to go with the color, because I'd done thousands of watercolor paintings, and I was used to layering. I was used to using different brushes and textures and everything like that. But when it came to working outside, I didn't quite know what to do. So you can see with this one, I've almost like done the drawing, and I've just coloured in some of the shapes. So I did the kind of the life buoy, the ring, and I did the water, and it's just in two colours, and it kind of works. You know, it sits alongside the black and the white, but it's not. It wasn't really what I wanted, but it was kind of fun at the time, and I wasn't taking it seriously. I wasn't teaching anybody. I was teaching workshops, and I was teaching children. I'm sorry, teaching teachers to teach children. So I was doing all my school training, lots of it, but I wasn't really teaching this kind of thing. This was just a bit new to me, working outside. So I hadn't kind of worked out the colouring thing. It was just colouring in the shapes. But I kind of like this because it's got that kind of simplicity to it, which I really enjoy. And it's got a lot of range of tones, and so those little fluffy clouds have made their way in as well. I think they were like following me around all around Liverpool, wherever I went. And the other thing I want to mention about these particular ones is they're all my local city, apart from the Venice ones, but these are all my local city. So I was doing these with the local Liverpool urban sketching group. So it was becoming part of a community of people that just went out there and just wanted to draw and just celebrate the world that you're in, which was lovely. It was such a nice, friendly, warm environment that I was just starting to discover for the first time, which was just great. I just loved it so much.
Frank has asked as well, how do you develop your need to add a bit of quirkiness in your style instead of just copying the site that you're seeing? And he quoted you and said, "Life is too short to count windows."
Well, that's it. That's basically it. So I think the important thing to remember was that Frank who asked that question?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, great question. I think the important thing to remember, Frank, is I'm not copying photographs. I'm actually drawing the space that I'm in. So when you're outside drawing the space that you're in, you don't quite see everything in terms of straight lines. And I was chatting to Julian and Elizabeth so much about this last week. Elizabeth, just nod your head for me in agreement, please. No, she switched off. Thank you. Thank you. So when you're outside, you know, you're not measuring straight lines against straight edges of the page. You know, lines are going off in different directions and you're moving around quite a lot. So although it kind of looks on one level quirky, to me, it's a much truer representation of recording the space that you're in, because it's cold, it's windy, the light changes, you get hungry, you need the toilet, someone comes in, talks to you, somebody gets in your way, you get distracted. You know, there's all sorts going on. And I'm not trying to copy a photograph because I don't know what a photograph would look like of this scene. I'm just drawing the space around me. And maybe that's why, you know, windows get missed out and clouds appear, and, you know, the windows look like almost like they're kind of moving around and dancing across the facade of the building on the other side, which, by the way, that building is the Tate Gallery in Liverpool.
A few people have noticed as well, is this the beginning of your splashing, or had you already always used it?
No, the splashing happened a long time before that, because I've been painting watercolors for years and years, and the splashing was a big part of that. So when I started to apply the color, although I was painting inside the shapes, I knew that I wanted to put splashes on just to kind of energize it, just to kind of activate things a little bit. But I wasn't quite sure where the color was going to take me. And quite possibly at this point, which is maybe about 2017, I could have quite easily kind of gone backwards and just not bothered putting any more color on, and just kept the drawings as black and white drawings, and then continued down the route of just painting in the studio. But that didn't happen, as we all know.
Mary Jo has asked, how does the mood you're in on any given day affect the completed sketch? She says she loves the scenes that seem to radiate joy.
Well, again, that's a great question. I think generally always I'm happy and, you know, feeling pretty upbeat every time I'm drawing. I think some subjects I think talk to me a lot more than others. You know, some subjects I choose to do, especially if it's a workshop holiday, because I want to create variety for the students. So in Bezier, for example, some of the subjects I loved more than others, but I wanted to choose 5 subjects which were very different in different ways, and we could maximize the learning opportunities for everybody. But if it was left to me, I'd probably end up just choosing all my favorite ones, and they may be a little bit too similar. So I think in answer to your question, I'm always feeling upbeat, but some are more upbeat than others. And I think if I'm really, really happy with the subject, I maybe feel a bit more energized, maybe I'll put a bit more into it. But that it very rarely happens that there's a subject that doesn't turn me on, because I spend a lot of time trying to choose the right subjects. There might be one or two in this talk a bit later on where perhaps the subject didn't perhaps speak to me as much, and I can talk a little bit about that, and you can kind of see how maybe it's slightly different from some of the others. This one, I think this could be the last black and white one. I'm not sure, but this is probably the most sophisticated black and white one I've done, and this is me really coming to terms with the Tombow brush pens. So you can see the gate in the foreground, that's done with the N79, which is a warm mid-grey. And then I've used a much darker grey behind at the top to make it pop, so you can see light against dark, dark against light. So I'm really playing around with that at this stage, and I haven't quite developed it. And then in the distance, you can see I've used what's called the N60, which is the cool grey, to give that expanse of depth, which is the Cheshire plain, which kind of recedes off into the distance. So this was a really important sketch for me, and this is done up in a place called Bewardsley, which is on top of the hill in Cheshire. It's about an hour south of where I live, and this is me really kind of pushing things as much as possible. And you can see the little fluffy clouds have disappeared, and now it's just a kind of big sweep of sky, which probably looks a bit more natural. So this is getting towards the end of that kind of phase, really. But again, I'm still not quite sure where I'm going to go next, but it's exciting stuff.
Before we move on to the next one, which I know has colour in it, Carolyn's asked a really great question. Does doing the black and white sketches help you distinguish tone from colour?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the two go hand in hand, because by doing a sketch like this, I kind of know the tonal value of the colour, and I also know where the colour needs to go and where I need to leave white. So these are, you know, this at the time of doing this, it wasn't a working drawing because it wasn't leading anywhere. You know, it's like all the other ones so far, they are just themselves. You know, I'm not practicing or developing or preparing anything. But looking at this now, in light of what I do these days, I can see how a drawing like this would really help with the colour. Perhaps not so much the choice of colour, but how dark it needs to be, how light it needs to be, where it needs to be mixed, and where it doesn't go.
I just noticed that the auto captions are making you sound very strange.
Really?
Yeah, one of them, when you said when you feel very upbeat, the captions say you feel very obese.
I've just had a week in France. What do you expect? My goodness, huge big meals. Right, guys. So now we move on to colour. Now this would have been done, let me think, about 2016, I think. Yeah, this would be about eight years ago. And this is Chester, which I've sketched and painted lots and lots of times. And you can see the colours going on, but it's only little splashes of colour. And it's very, very vibrant, but it's sitting behind the line work and it's sitting behind the tone. But there's lots of areas where there's no colour at all. And there's a real, I feel like a real strength to this, like a little splash of blue just up at the top as well. So the painting on this would have taken maybe 2 or 3 minutes, you know, really quick. And because to me at this stage, there's still drawings, you know, very limited amount of color, but there's still very much drawings. The drawing is dominating the picture at this stage. A lot of black going on. Yeah, Carolyn's just asked, was this a colour first, then line drawing? So with this, I would have just very loosely sketched the outline out with a brush pen, then put the colour on, and then all the line work. So there would have been no, if you like, step 2. So step 1, very simple step 1, then jumping onto colour, and then lots of line work. at the end as well. And again, this is another one of Chester. So you can see I'm not actually going very far at this stage. I'm not traveling anywhere because I'm not teaching, I'm not demonstrating. This is me on a real learning curve. Or these ones are so important to me. Rita's just the clouds come back on this one. I couldn't. It's like a spaceship, isn't it? It's like hovering around, following me around all over the place. So with these ones, this is a huge learning thing for me, because I'm putting the colour in, but I'm not quite sure where the colour's going to take me. I'm still using a lot of tone, a lot of black. It's a kind of nice balance between drawing and painting, but I look at them now and I feel there's probably just not enough colour. There's a bit too much black going on, which kind of makes them a bit severe and a bit cold. But I never thought that at the moment. I was just having so much fun and just working things out. You can see the cobbles have started to appear, and you know, a lot of the black timber frame buildings, which I love doing now, and the patterning on the windows and the brickwork effect, hatching techniques. So all the things I'm using now are starting to appear. And I think what's really exciting is I just didn't know where it was gonna take me. Right, so again, this is about the same time, maybe a little bit later. So things were kind of changing quite rapidly at this stage. And again, this is Liverpool. So I haven't really gone any further than Chester and Liverpool, which are my two nearest cities in England. And this is Canning Dock in Liverpool. So you can see there's a bit of a change in this one because I'm putting more colour on. There's quite a lot of colour in this, maybe 4 or 5 different colours, but they're all very much focused in the centre. You know, there's greens and there's probably Windsor blue, Windsor green or Hooker's green, cadmium red, some kind of yellow kind of thing happening in there as well, and then a bit of white to make pink. And it's really kind of an explosion of colour in the centre, just framed by lots of tone work and black line work as well.
We've had a few people ask, Ian, I don't know whether it's worth mentioning now. People have asked where you start within the sketch. Do you start in the foreground, the background? What's the kind of first lines that you lay down?
Well, this is a great one to talk about for that question. So with a sketch like this, if you look at the body of the boat, it's basically a triangle. So I would have started off with a triangle, just that shape in the middle. And then from that, the masts would have gone up. The piece at the front would have shot out. The bollards down at the bottom. So it would have just started life as a shape, a dominant shape. So I don't do the traditional thing of perhaps starting in the background and coming forward, because that kind of doesn't really work for me. I just look for a very strong, dominant shape. So it just would have been the body of the boat as a triangle, and then, you know, would have worked out from there. But every picture is different. So because of this one, the way it's composed on the page, you would have started in the middle and gone outwards. But sometimes you're working from the top down to the bottom. It just depends on what the main basic shapes are in front of you and how you can structure it on a page. But what's interesting, at the time of doing this, I probably wasn't really thinking about that. I think about it a lot now because I'm teaching so much, but back then I just wouldn't have been thinking about it. It would have just been me having fun and, you know, trying to hide from people. Didn't want people to come and watch me.
We've had quite a few people ask as well whether you've been inspired by any particular artists.
Not for this. I mean, over the years, I have been hugely inspired by lots of people, especially the likes of David Hockney, but not for urban sketching. No, I mean, there's lots of fabulous urban sketchers out there, but I've never felt really drawn to want to do anything what they do. I think I've always treated this as a way of me just recording the world around me and just using all my little tricks and things like that. So this is, if you like, going back to a sketch that we saw earlier up on the hill in Bawardsley. But this is obviously colour, but I've only coloured the foreground, the midground and the background. I've just left black and white. And again, it fits in with that thing of of what we've been talking about over the last 4 or 5 sketches, where I'm just doing a little part of the sketch in colour, and I'm really trying to make that little bit sing, you know, really pop the colours in, say, a few select parts of the drawing, and the rest of it is just black and white and grey. And at this particular time, looking back, this is what, say 8 years ago, I wouldn't have had probably the ability maybe to do the background. I mean, maybe I did, but I probably didn't feel confident enough. So all the background's just done as a drawing, and I've just popped colour in the foreground. So I'm kind of not so much limiting myself, but I'm just not aware that the colour could do so much more. I'm just keeping it quite reduced in some way and still using a lot of black, which in some ways is a good thing. It's not a criticism. In some ways, you know, people prefer the black, but for me, the way I've gone in my development, I'm moving away from the black a little bit more than what I did back then. That's just how we change, isn't it, I suppose? So this is Nelson Street in Liverpool. And again, you can see the pops of colour. So you've got that gorgeous green Chinese lantern cutting right down the centre. And we talked a minute ago about where your starting point would be. So in a sketch like this, it would just be a vertical line that cuts right down the centre. And then it's got those beautiful little red lanterns just popped along. Now, if it's okay, I'm going to read a story from my new book about this particular scene. So this is called the Flash. Okay. So if you want to just sit back, get your popcorn out, guys, and I'm going to read a little story, okay, about this particular drawing, and it's called the Flash. I was doing a workshop one Saturday afternoon in Nelson Street, which is in the heart of Liverpool's Chinatown, the oldest Chinese community in Europe, and home to the biggest pagoda outside of China. So in the distance, that's the biggest pagoda. It's a busy part of the city, full of bars and restaurants, and people hanging around chatting and wandering. It had been raining in the morning, so the start of the workshop had been delayed by a few hours, which meant we were still sketching outside in the afternoon when all the bars were open. I had 15 students, all closely squeezed together, almost for protection, because as the day went on, the atmosphere got livelier and the locals got louder. Music was blaring from the pubs, the Chinese restaurants were steamy, and the stag parties and the hen-dos were all on the prowl. The livelier it got, the closer we sat together. One of my students was an elderly lady called Margaret, who wore a bright pink fluffy jacket. She sat next to me and didn't say a word. She was totally engrossed in the work, listened to everything, followed all the instructions, but said nothing, quiet as a mouse. So the workshop continued. We sketched and I taught. As the day went on, the bars got busier and the music got louder. More and more groups were wandering from bar to pub. Some came over and watched, but mostly ignored us. Margaret, bright pink fluffy jacket, quiet as a mouse, kept sketching and listening. After a while, a group of lads, probably on a stag do, ambled past and stood in front of us, blocking the view. So we carried on sketching. I kept teaching, and Margaret, bright pink fluffy jacket, kept quiet as a mouse. The lads seemed annoyed that we ignored them, and one of them asked if we could sketch him. I replied, no, sorry, we're drawing the pagoda, and we kept on working. His friend appeared disappointed by my reply, so he promptly dropped his trousers and underpants and announced to the group, draw this then! To which Margaret, bright pink fluffy jacket, quiet as a mouse, replied, I'd love to, sweetheart, but my pen isn't small enough. It was the first thing I'd heard her say all day, and we all burst out laughing. The lads also thought it funny, apart from the one with his trousers down, and they all disappeared into the nearest pub. So make sure when you go out sketching, you have every pen for every opportunity. So that was a story. That story is not quite attached to that scene, but it's exactly the same scene that I sketched a few years later. And this is the pagoda. This is the Chinese pagoda. Now, what's interesting about this is there's a real change now in the use of colour. So this would be about a year later from some of the ones that we saw previously. And you can see colours going a lot more into the picture. And I'm almost like channeling some of the colour work that I did years ago when my paintings were just primarily watercolour. You know, I'm using a lot more colour and I'm putting it in lots of other places as well, but there's still the drawing and the black starting to come through. And this is, you know, becoming quite a sophisticated kind of drawing compared to some of the other ones. And it was really exciting, you know, to be able to do this, because it was all just new. It was so new, it was so fresh to me. I still hadn't worked out a way of teaching it. I hadn't broken it down into the steps that I do now. So there's no kind of teaching going on like of this at this particular time. But it was just great fun for me to, you know, just explore the relationship between colour and line work and just being, you know, being outside. So all of these, I'm kind of by myself, you know, I'm kind of on my own really. There's nobody kind of around me.
Do you find it easier to sketch on your own or more difficult?
That's a great question. It depends, because I get inspired by the students, and the students obviously influence my work, and you'll see all of that coming on later on. But I get inspired by working, you know, with students. But I think sometimes when you're by yourself, you can cheat. you can change the process. Because when I'm teaching, I mean, when I was with, you know, Elizabeth and Julian last week, I have a format, you know, step by step by step, and I have to stick to that. I can't suddenly start changing it around, because some of the less experienced students or less confident students will get, you know, get upset or get worried about that. But when I'm by myself, I can just do whatever I want, and I kind of like that. You know, it's that kind of freedom, and I think we all need to just go off and have that kind of freedom every now and then to kind of push our boundaries.
We just had a question on YouTube saying, how did you break the habit of training in classic art and drawing to your current and fantastic, interesting method?
How did I break the habit? I think it's just going down that route of just wanting to, I think, capture the world in a way that's sort of fits your personality. I think, you know, because hopefully I have a lot of energy and curiosity and a really big sense of humour. Not everyone laughs at my jokes, but, you know, I tell lots of jokes and I don't take things too seriously. I love colour, I love energy, I love life, I love people. So my pictures are full of people, but you just can't see them. So I kind of like all of that. You know, I like just pushing those kind of boundaries, whereas a very traditional, technical, architectural kind of drawing just isn't, I'm not in it. It just doesn't speak to me. Whereas this is fun, it's funky, you know, I'm twisting things, I'm bending things, I'm playing around, you know, and that's how I run my workshops as well. You know, I tell jokes every day, I tell stories every day. We do a thing now called urban stretching, where we do lots of stretches as well, which is really cool. And I just kind of keep it, as Elizabeth's demonstrating for me now. It's so good. That's amazing. Thank you. I think Anya's about to start doing it as well. Oh no, she's tempted. So the traditional route of recording something as accurately as maybe it looks like a photograph just doesn't speak to me at all. This does, and you can see in this one the way it's just moved now that there's more colour. The colour is getting more dominance in the picture. Now this is important. I've shown you these ones because this was my very first urban sketching trip away. So by now I was fully embraced in the whole urban sketching thing, and I'd completely stopped doing studio work at this point. So this was the main thing that I was doing, and I was starting to sell lots of them, and I was starting to get them published in prints. So I took myself off down to London. This would have been 2017. And I went down with an old college friend of mine, and I just spent 4 days in London drawing. And I was doing 2 of these a day, maybe 3. So it was just really, really intense. And this is the very first time I'd ever done this. So up until then, I was maybe doing, you know, 1, maybe two a week. But here I did about 8 in, say, 3 days. So I was drawing every day, getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning, sketching through till it got dark, going around all sorts of different locations. So this was a really intense kind of learning experience for me. And obviously I'm tackling, really complicated subjects. The colour's still only in certain parts of the picture, but I think the balance between colour and drawing, colour and tone, is starting to get much healthier in this particular picture. And it was such a thrill as well to go off and do these things. This was done at the same time. This is actually a much quicker sketch than the other one. So the previous one of Tower Bridge would have taken me maybe 2.5 hours, and this was probably just an hour. This was really, really quick. And I was starting at this point to get more confident when it came to crowds of people. So the Liverpool ones that you saw previously, I kind of didn't feel like I wanted anybody to watch me. So I'd often have my back up against the wall, or a huge big sandwich board saying, don't come anywhere near me. But with these ones, I was much happier about people coming along and watching, and I'd often stop and talk to people and explain what I was doing and things. So I think my confidence of being outside was really starting to grow at this time. Now, this is my very first trip abroad. I mean, I know we did the Venice ones at the beginning, but they weren't like urban sketches. This is Orgiva, which is in Spain, in southern Spain, and this is in the garden of my lovely, lovely brother-in-law, Tony. He owns this property, and this is a really old olive tree, as you can see. So this is the first time I took myself abroad, and again, by myself, no teaching, just sitting there. And just seeing this now as an opportunity to really lose yourself. So this is very different from the one at the beginning. The one at the beginning is just capturing the moments. This is capturing a full experience, for 2 hours, 3 hours, and just getting lost. And I think with these drawings now, I was becoming very aware of the real health benefits of doing this, of doing these things, of just losing yourself amongst all these shapes and patterns and colours and textures, and it was starting to open up for me a lot of potential in this world. I could see the direction it was starting to go. I hadn't figured out the teaching side yet, but I just knew this was a really cool thing, and I wanted to get more and more and more involved in it. Now I'm showing you this one. This was done at the same time. This is a place called Salobreña, which is on the southern coast of Spain. And this is part of the same trip. And this is like looking down. And I'm showing you this one because it's the first time I ever did rooftops like this. And this is me picking really complicated subjects now to push me. And also, can you see the framing? You see how it's framed? It's like it's hanging down, isn't it, from the top edge of the picture with all that white space. So this is me starting to understand the power of white space and where not to put things. And somebody said to me before about, influencers. I mean, there was nobody influencing me about this. This was just me working it all out for myself. I mean, I wasn't looking at anybody else's work. This is just me trying to figure it out for myself and looking at what I was doing and looking at the subject and just trying to capture the atmosphere. So this is starting to get that balance between what you see and what you can do, how you can manipulate that scene.
Carolyn has asked as well, do you agree with the old saying to learn formal rules in order to learn how to break them?
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, if you don't understand them and then you decide to break them, you don't really know what you're breaking, do you? So you're kind of going to get a bit lost. So things like perspective, if you're going to break perspective, you've really got to know what perspective's about. And I don't feel I break perspective that much. I kind of bend it sometimes a little bit, but yeah, it's absolutely true. You can't break any of these rules because you don't really know. You won't realize you're breaking them. You just be getting things wrong. So yeah, I think you do have to be able to do all of these things. And I was fortunate because I learned to do them, a few years ago, and then I've been messing around ever since.
We've had someone ask, have you been or sketched in Beverley, East Yorkshire? There's lots of great historic and quirky buildings in my town.
No, I haven't. No, I've never really done much up in Yorkshire. We did. Is Robin Hood's Bay in Yorkshire? I think it is, isn't it? Is it? It's on the east coast. Yeah, but no, we haven't done a huge amount. Now, I'm showing you this one because this is the first time I took myself abroad just to do urban sketching. So I've been abroad, on holiday. So the previous ones of Salabrania and Ortiga were holidays. But this is when I took myself off to Amsterdam. And this would have been early 2018. So I still hadn't done any urban sketching teaching at this point. And I went off to Amsterdam by myself for about 5 days. And again, this was a really intensive period. I was doing 2, maybe 3 of these every single day. So these would have taken perhaps 2.5 hours. I would have done one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one sort of early evening, late afternoon. And it was really kind of intense. But this is me just learning about how I can put these things together. So I was working incredibly hard. No one was watching me. I had nobody around me. I was just picking spots, quiet spots, and just figuring things out. So in a picture like this, I'd be figuring out all the contours of the pavement and the road. I'd be figuring out the contrast between the black building on the right-hand side and then the more colourful building on the left. I'd be figuring out the hatching on top of the colour, how the lamppost can dominate the scene, how you get weight on the wheels of the bike. So all these little things that I do now, and I can teach people. This is me figuring those things out for the very, very first time. All the little cracks in the pavement at the bottom as well. So this is probably one of my favourite sketches I've ever done. So it's not the best one, but it's probably my favourite. I'd never sell this one. Unless somebody offered me a huge amount of money, then I might reconsider. This was done at the same time. So this is a little swing bridge in Amsterdam. And again, I'm really working stuff out here, trying to figure out, not style, because I wasn't mindful of style, but what it is I'm really trying to do in these pictures. Capturing all the patterns and the layers of colour, noticing all the bikes, taking bikes out. So there would have been probably 50 bikes around those railings. So I'm just taking out as many as I can get away with. Lots and lots of negative space. So if you look at the railings on the bridge, you've got a really kind of light, like a yellow ochre banister. Can you see it just further down, Rebecca, with that little cursing? Can you see that's it? Yeah. And then behind that, you've got that really dark tone work. So that was a big thing for me, working that kind of negative space out, which I do lots of now. So you can see on that kind of horizontal post, there's little pops of black behind, and then lower down you've got dark against light as well. So all these like little visual tricks that I'm almost taking for granted now, this is me figuring them out for the first time. And this is one of the bridges that goes across the Amstel River, and I'm really starting to work in the detail and the textures now. So when I look at this drawing, I can see a lot of line work sitting on top of the colour, to kind of bring through those textures, and then the kind of quirky little buildings in the background, or sitting side by side, waiting patiently to be noticed, and all the cables running across the top. And then I'm going to show you a two of Edinburgh, because I'm really starting to push the detail in these now. This is almost like the end of the detail phase, where I stopped pushing it and I felt, right, I'm putting enough detail in now. I don't need to push this thing any further. I need to start trying to do other things instead. So these were actually commissions. So somebody commissioned me to go up to Scotland to do these, and I sketched them on location, but I actually finished them off in the studio because it was just impractical to sort of do it on location. So these would have been done, 70% on location, and the rest of it would have been done working from reference photographs, which I don't often do. I sometimes have to do when I'm teaching, but normally they're always done outside. And then I think there's one more where I've pushed it even further, and you can see. So to me now, looking at that, the brickwork's probably a little bit excessive. I don't think I would ever put that much in now, because it just makes me feel dizzy looking at it. But at that time, it felt like the right thing to do. Because all the time I'm just pushing things as far as I can go. And then afterwards you reflect upon it, you think, that worked, that didn't, maybe that had too much colour, too much tone, you know. So you're learning all the time. And I look at this now and I think it's great for what I was trying to do, but I'd probably just rein in the patterning a little bit. Maybe, you know, not vary the brickwork quite as much. So you're learning all the time, you know, you're constantly looking at things and thinking, you know, how can I change it? The perspective's great. I mean, the perspective works really well. Just think it's a bit kind of excessive in terms of the different bricks. It just makes your eyes go funny.
Are these still just the 5 grey brush pens as well, or is there any more?
Yeah, no, so at this stage now I'm using the 5. I think I'm using the 5 that we use all the time. There might be another slightly darker grey, but I'm using a hatching technique on top of the grey as well, you know, just to give it more depth, especially around the side of that building that goes right down the centre. You can see the right hand edge of that is a lot darker. Right, so now we get to the beginning of my teaching. So I've done some workshops in the UK, and I've been doing workshops for years, but not outside. And then in 2018, I went to the big international drawing symposium as one of the instructors. So when I got to Porto, I had to kind of work out a way of teaching what I've been doing for quite a few years. So I came up with this method of teaching, but then I was putting the colour on first. So this is coloured, painted first, and then there's layers of drawing on top. And it was great fun, it was quick, but it was kind of hard because there was no foundation down on the page. And I think it was probably quite tricky for the students. I mean, I loved it, I had a whale of a time, you know, but I think the students were finding it quite challenging. So if we look at the next one, you can see there's 2 from this particular trim. This is Largo de Pena Ventosa, which is the most beautiful square in Porto. And this was painted first. So the colour went on first. And the reason the colour's going on first here is because that was the way I planned to do it for the workshop. So I didn't really want to change it. And because I only had 3 hours to teach the workshops, as opposed to the ones I do now, which take all day, I had to come up with a method which was fairly quick and immediate. So putting the colour on first kind of bypasses a lot of the compositional things, which is great for speed, but it's not always good for the poor old students who happened to do it. But they all loved it. They all had a whale of a time. So this is me beginning to work out a way of teaching and still doing, you know, really complicated subjects, which everyone seems to enjoy. And then at the same time, I started doing workshop holidays like I do now. So this is a place called Aquafredda, which is in Italy. It's on the coast in Italy. And this is me now beginning to teach. I've got a group of students around me. I'm having to work out ways in which I can teach this. So I'm choosing subjects now which are teachable, unlike some of the other ones before. So this is it looks complicated, but it's a really kind of simple structure because it's just a diagonal that cuts right the way across from top left to bottom right, and it's counterbalanced by the post of the umbrella. And then it's teaching them things like perspective in water, which you don't often think about, but there's actually perspective going on in the water and the kind of ripples. And then it's teaching people to look really carefully at the stones at the bottom, which we then turn into a sweet shop, which we did in Brighton quite recently. So you're looking at stones and you're trying to be really inventive and looking at different patterns and shapes and everything. So this is very, very sophisticated compared to some of the earlier ones, and it's got that nice balance between the drawing and the painting. And this is Matira. Now, this is me really starting to work out how I'm going to start teaching colour. So with this one, there's a transition going across from right to left. It goes from cold to warm. So rather than the colour previously just populating small areas to make the picture perhaps look realistic, this is playing with colour as a way of teaching students how they can use this technique, just as a way of making it visually interesting, going from cold to warm, or mysterious to lively and bright, or however you want to phrase it, but just using that transition going across. And it's just a nice kind of teaching point. So the drawings, really sophisticated, really complicated, layered step by step, but using colour in a very kind of playful way. So this is me as a teacher starting to work these ideas out for the first time. Now, just going to have a little break for a moment, because I'm going to tell you something about this one, which I've never ever told anybody before. Because I have this most amazing opportunity to travel around the world now and teach, but sometimes it's not always as wonderful as it might seem. So I was invited about 2018, we're up to now, to go to Ljubljana, which is in Slovenia. I was invited to go out there to teach workshops for about four days. And when I went there, I didn't know anybody at all. I'd never worked with these people before, and it was, I had not done that many trips. And I decided that I was going to do, before the workshops, I was going to do a free demonstration for anybody who wanted to turn up. So they advertised it, and I had about 65 people turned up, which is a huge amount of people. So thankfully, the place where we were, there was plenty of big steps behind where they could all sit and they could see. And I did this demo, which took about 2.5 hours. I was chatting to them and everything, and it was wonderful. They loved it so much. And then when it was all over, some of them came over and thanked me, and then everyone just disappeared. And 5 minutes later, I was sitting there at a bar, completely alone. There was nobody with me. They all just disappeared totally. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, that's a really strange thing, isn't it? You travel all the way over to a place, you give people a free demonstration, they love it, and then everyone just walks away. So I made a promise to myself that I'd never ever let myself be in that position again. And that kind of very much determines the people that I work with now, because what you're doing is you're exposing yourself. I expose myself all the time. I'm giving so much, and I have to be very, very careful. But sometimes you don't allow yourself to be in a position where you can feel a bit kind of let down, a bit lonely. And there was no intention, nobody meant to do that. It was just the outcome that happened, because they didn't really know me, and nobody thought to say, Ian, would you like to come for a drink? They all disappeared. And I can still remember that feeling, 7 years later, of sitting there with a beer in front of me, thinking, 1 minute you're in the middle of this group of people who can't thank you enough, and the next minute you're sitting there all by yourself. So I've vowed that
I'd always buy you a drink, Ian.
Pardon?
I'd always buy you a drink.
Yeah, and that's why I work. That's why I work with you. But it's that's just a personal story, and I think the point of it is you have to be very careful. You give so much, but you have to kind of protect yourself as well. Now, this is my first trip to America. America was a place I always wanted to go to. So this is 2018 still, I think, maybe 2019. And I went to New Orleans. I was so excited. So this is me now moving forward again and really starting to capture stories, looking for subjects which really speak to me. So the signage is just wonderful. The balcony, the telegraph poles, everything about it is just so exciting. So this is me now looking for new adventures. The style or the way of working is starting to become a lot more confident. I'm more kind of self-assured in what I'm doing. So now I'm just pushing the boundaries in terms of subject matter. And then this is the first online workshop I did on location. I'd done loads and loads of workshops prior to this, but this was the first one where we're actually filming on location. And again, it's in New Orleans. This is the last one that I did. So I'm really starting to break it down now to the point where I can actually teach it, to a camera. And this is probably the first one I did where it was looking quite, sophisticated and the kind of style and the way of working that I wanted, but I'm still capturing all those wonderful little stories that I can see in front of me. And then COVID came along in 2020. So all my trips got cancelled. Just as it all got started, it all got cancelled. So I did a tour of my house. Like I guess a lot of us, we couldn't go anywhere. So I started drawing the interior of my house. And this is my living room. So I was treating these in a very similar kind of way to how I do, the cityscapes and the landscapes. Instead of the sky, you've got a ceiling. Instead of a building, you've got a door. But it's all built up in the same way.
It looks like you need a plasterer to see that ceiling.
Do you know that's what everyone says? Everyone said, and it's been decorated since then. And I put a lot of paint on the ceiling, so it's probably not quite as bad. But that's like most things, that's an exaggeration. Those cracks on the ceiling, they're trying to mirror some of the patterns. So Penn's just said no clouds. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any in there. No, room's not big enough. So I also did a series of vehicles as well, which was just great fun to do. Now, this is done from a photograph. And the sad thing about working from photographs is you can never really tell the difference between the two. I feel like there should be a difference, but when I work from a photograph or when I work on location, there seems to be no difference at all. And I can't tell them apart. But this would have been done. So this is COVID time. This is me kind of in isolation. So I'm just really blasting the color on here. Because no one's watching me, I'm not teaching, I'm just really playing around and messing about. So just really blasting that cadmium red on and just spreading it around to create the shape, and then layering it with tone work and line work as well. And this is another interior. This used to be my studio, but it's not anymore. And the reason it's not my studio is it was too big. So big studios don't suit me at all because they're really hard to keep tidy. So this is just now like a little lounge area up in the attic. It's got my two guitars there. I play guitar, by the way, really, really badly. And what makes it even worse is when I'm away sometimes, I play guitar and I start singing as well. And that makes it far worse for the students. But I don't apologise for it. I'll never stop doing it either. So these are all just toggle between kind of COVID time. So this is, again, just trying out different things, different subjects, because I'm not in an opportunity to be able to travel anymore. And then I went down to visit my sister. My sister lives on the south coast. So during lockdown time, obviously we couldn't go abroad. I wasn't allowed to get on a plane. But I was able to travel within the UK. So I did a whole series of paintings and drawings down on the south coast of England in Deal. And what's significant about these is I'm still looking for new subjects all the time. I'm searching, going looking for new things to try out. I'm still trying out new things all the time. So I've never really done a series of boats before. So it's looking deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject matter, looking at how these things just sit within space, all the ropes and chains that drop down. And then there's a little seagull there in the background. He's called Henry, and there's a whole chapter in my book devoted to Henry, which I won't read out because obviously, we've been talking for a while already. But if you get the book, you'll read all about Henry, and the story's all done from Henry's point of view as well. And then this is also the same trip down there on the south coast. This is St. Margaret's Bay. So this is the beginning or the end of the White Cliffs of Dover. And again, I've never, ever drawn a subject like this. So it's using all the knowledge that I gained over the previous years and all the techniques and application of colour, and then just applying it to sort of new subjects, really. And then this is going to Cornwall, which again opened up a whole new range of subjects for me, which was just wonderful. So I'm kind of investing more ideas into the scenes now. So I'm thinking about how the boat is sitting there, and the backdrop of all the buildings are all kind of acting as almost like an audience to the main events. So I'm kind of investing lots and lots of ideas, which you can't do from a photograph. You know, you've got to actually be there and experience that space and start to work these things out. So it's at this stage now, I've had a lot more experience of being outside. So I'm perhaps using my imagination a lot more and inventing things a lot more and playing around with shapes and space as well, and just having so much fun. And this is another example you can see. You know, the two boats are the main events. They're like, if you like, the main actors, and then the support cast is it's Mevagissey, so it's a huge big expanse of Mevagissey, which is the most gorgeous little coastal town in Cornwall. And all the kind of the windows are like little eyes just poking up, kind of looking at what's going on. And all of that just comes from being there, you know, constructing a picture and using that as an opportunity to work out the space that you're actually in, and then investing it with thoughts and ideas afterwards. Now, at the same time, I was starting to work with Urban Sketch Course, probably prior to this, a couple of years before, and we started travelling around the UK because we couldn't really go anywhere else. We weren't allowed to fly. So we went down to Robin Hood's Bay. Now, what's interesting about this is that the teaching is becoming a really big part of what I do. So in this one, we're choosing complicated subjects to challenge the students, you know, with some extreme perspective, and we're limiting the palette as well. So there's only 3 colours in this. And again, that's a teaching point, you know, it's showing people that you only, you know, you can get away with just a very limited palette if you're using things like complementaries and you're adding white to them as well. So the teaching side is really becoming a big thing, and the teaching is very much influencing the subjects that I'm starting to pick. So previously I was just drawing things that I like the look of, whereas now I'm very mindful of what it is I want to teach the students. And then I went to Mexico. So this is post lockdown, this is after lockdown, and one of the first trips I did was a trip to San Miguel de Allende. I was there for 2 weeks teaching. So this was just like a blast of colour, just an amazing celebration of colour, which is probably, you know, just a relief that finally, you know, the world opened up again and I was able to get away and, you know, just start to, I think, develop a lot of the things that I'd kind of learned during lockdown maybe, and just apply it to new places, to new subjects, looking for new shapes and stories to tell, and just getting captivated by those balconies. This is a gorgeous little church just outside the city that we visited. So you can see how the white space in the middle, which I've been developing, I'm starting to frame it now with this really fancy pattern and all the kind of colour work and, you know, all the wonderful little bits of detail and texture. So it's very much driven by what I'm trying to teach the students and how you can compose a picture and have like as much fun as possible. Everyone's gone really quiet. You've got no questions?
Got some that were from earlier that were kind of weren't relating to a specific picture. April's asked, how long does your typical drawing take?
Okay, great question. So if I'm by myself doing, say, this one, which I'll talk about in a moment, this is in Santa Fe, and this would take me by myself maybe just under 3 hours, I guess. So yeah, they take quite a while. I certainly couldn't do, like the London ones we saw before, I was doing maybe 3 of those in a day. Now I wouldn't really be able to do 2. They're much slower now. I think maybe I've got a bit slower, but I think also the pictures are becoming more complicated, more complex. So by myself, this would take under 3 hours, I guess. But as a workshop, it takes a whole day, whole day.
Yeah.
So this is the rail yard in Santa Fe, which was a demonstration sketch with Magdalene Island School of Art, who I'm working with next week, and I'm going off to Bar Harbour with them. And again, this is going back to what I said before about capturing those stories that I'm just really captivated by. You know, these wonderful water towers that you can see, and the level crossing and all the signage. So this is me pushing me now, you know, really pushing myself, obviously teaching the students, picking complicated subjects, which enables me to hopefully get them really engaged in what we're doing, but helping them to learn as much as possible, you know, pushing people's boundaries and keeping people perhaps out of their comfort zone, so they come away feeling much more emboldened that they can actually achieve a lot more now. And this is also in Santa Fe with Magdalene Island, and this is the Native American Museum. So this is me just being able to travel and, you know, capture these iconic buildings and you know, just really not taking for granted where I am, and just being really grateful that I can go to these places and just teach people how to tell stories based upon what they can see in front of them. You know, so it's come a long way from what we started looking at, you know, at the beginning of this presentation. This is just me and pushing students as well, because the two go hand in hand. I have to be really inspired by the subjects, and hopefully it inspires the students as well. And Cheryl has just mentioned that she was with me on this particular one. This was her first workshop with me. Yeah. This is one of my favorite drawings that I've done in America. This is Bayfield, which is, and in the distance you can see Lake Superior, and then beyond that you can maybe just make out Magdalene Island, which is where the main campus for Magdalene Island School of Art is. So this is the main street looking down towards the lake, and so we're squashed on pavement, me and about 12 students, lots and lots of people walking past. Really complicated scene, or it looks really complicated, but we kept it really simple, and then it just becomes more and more complicated as you start adding more things to it. So this is again me and pushing students, and then the fluffy clouds have been replaced by 5 big American seagulls who very, very kindly came and joined us. We have Mary Lou, we have Hank, we have Bubba, we have Jethro, and we have Melvin. And they came along to join us, and they just occupied that little space in the sky instead of the fluffy white clouds. Now this is Prague. So we're jumping up to about 2022 now, so a couple of years ago. And I did 5 days teaching in Prague, and this was the last workshop that we did, and I wanted to choose the most complicated view I could find, and oh my goodness, the students loved it. They loved it, and this is as hard as it gets in some ways, because we're looking at the river. We've got 2 bridges. We've got the famous Charles Bridge in the distance, and then the castle beyond, and then the main focal point is the bridge that's right in front of us. But then you've got the contour lines and the sweep of the road, and then you've got all the tram lines and the lampposts and the fancy lanterns and everything like that. So it's a ridiculously complicated view, but the students loved it. And this is what I do now. I just try and push me and push them and everybody as much as we can. And I just frame it with humour. And the more jokes I tell people, the less they realise how hard the workshops are.
Jan has asked, do you enjoy teaching?
Do I enjoy teaching?
Yeah.
Do I enjoy it? Oh my God, I love it. Yeah, it's so good. It's great. I just get away with all sorts. What I do, and Elizabeth will bear me out on this one, and Julian, I just go around and I pinch all the students' ideas and pretend it's mine, and then I just stick it in my drawing, and I tell everybody what I've just thought of, and nobody ever says anything to me. So that's kind of what I do. So that's why I love teaching so much. I just nick everybody else's ideas and say they were mine. I love it. It's a privilege, honestly. It's such privilege to be able to teach people. It really is.
Carolyn has also asked, when do you decide to push the drawings to the edge of the paper or towards the centre and have white space around?
It just depends, and it's, again, every picture is different. You know, so sometimes you'll go near the edge, you'll kind of flirt with the edges, and sometimes you want to leave a lot of space. And sometimes you might leave a lot of space at the beginning and then you can expand it out later on. But you want the picture to be able to breathe, especially in a very complicated scene like this. You know, you don't want to go too far to the edge. So if you look at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see that expanse of white. I mean, that's just as important as any other part of the picture, because it's allowing you, the spectator, your eyes to roam around the scene and, you know, grab the bits that you want. So yeah, white space is very, very underestimated. And one of the things that I think I've learned over the years, looking back over these pictures, is to really capture it, to really grab that white space. And this is in Sicily. And again, this was a workshop holiday that I did, and it's just finding incredibly complicated views, which is what challenges me as an artist, and I think it challenges the students. But because I teach it in a way that I break it down and make it really, really simple, hopefully, especially at the beginning with all the compositional stages, you know, everybody is successful, everybody achieves. You know, they don't look like my pictures, they look like their pictures, but they're learning lots and lots of things. So this is grabbing a scene, but trying to make as much of the scene as you can in terms of a panorama. So rather than one isolated building or a corner of a building, you know, I'm just grabbing everything and bringing it all into the picture. So it's trying to dominate the scene, I think, trying to control that scene. Some of the earlier sketches that we saw, you know, the scene's very much dominating me, but now I think I'm trying to manipulate and control it to tell the story that I'm really interested in. Somebody just asked then, think about, why don't I put people in? Is that right? Yeah. There's actually loads of people in there, but you just can't see them.
This is
They
a great
just walk.
example.
I know, they've just walked off. Yeah, this is Times Square. So this was a few years ago now, and I'm teaching in Times Square. I got invited by the New York Urban Sketching Group to come over and teach some workshops. So this was done really quickly. This is a 3-hour workshop. So I'm just grabbing all the main elements, which is basically all the signage and the traffic cones and all that kind of thing, and then filling the gaps in with the buildings behind. And this is full of people. It's got all the energy, all the colour, all the movements, as if it was populated with lots and lots of people. But if I put people in, they wouldn't be compatible with the rest of the picture. They just end up looking like statues. So the people don't go in, because it's not about the people. It's about the person looking at the picture. And this is another one from that particular trip of New York, of one of those famous bridges that goes across the river. So again, it's me just having the opportunity to draw and paint these wonderfully kind of iconic subjects. And although it's about the bridge, it's about lots of other things as well. It's about the cones, it's about the car, you know, everything, all the elements are coming together, really. And that's something I've learned over the years, you know, not to underestimate the small things that really, really matter. And then this
we've just been sorry, Ian. We've just been asked, is it a deliberate choice using the same color in various different sections to tie the whole scene together?
Yeah, that's a great observation. So it goes back to what I said before about using a limited palette. So because I'm only using, say, 3 or 4 colors, you've really got to maximize the use of those colors. So they do pop all over. So in this one, I've used cobalt turquoise light, and you can see it in some of the cactus trees in the background, but you can also see it in some of the ones in the foreground as well. So it's tying the foreground and the background in together. And that would be a really strong teaching point within the picture, using, say, a limited palette of 3 or maybe 4, but using it in various parts so it ties in the color composition of the picture. So that's a great point. And this is Arizona. This is the Tanque Verde Ranch in Arizona, again with Magdalen Island School of the Arts. And again, this is just such a thrill to have the opportunity to go and capture these wonderfully iconic landscapes. And you know, when I look back and I started sketching and drawing Chester and Liverpool, I never imagined for one moment I would end up going to Arizona and I'd be able to draw a landscape like this.
Someone's asked, Ian, when you're teaching students, are you teaching them your style or are you teaching them their own style?
Well, I'm not really teaching. I'm not mindful of style, Rebecca. I never mention style at all. What I mention are skills, techniques, processes, understanding, knowledge. It's all that. So I'm showing them. It's a bit like what we do with our training. You know, I'm teaching them the underlying principles. So when I'm teaching this, and probably Cheryl would have been with me on this one, I'm teaching composition. Now, composition is not my style. I don't hold composition as belonging to me. Composition is embedded in most artists' work. So I'm teaching composition, I'm teaching principles of composition. Then I'm teaching principles of colour mixing, complementary colours. Complementary colours is not my style. I never invented it. It's been around for years and years and years. So I'm teaching things that are just out there for anybody to absorb. Maybe what's unique is the combination of how I put them all together. But that's not really a style, is it? That's just me taking all the things that I like and putting them together. So if people take all of that on board, their pictures are going to look a bit like mine anyway, but it's going to be theirs. You know, it's going to be their line, their colour, their tone, their composition. I'm just teaching them underlying principles like what we do in Urban Sketch Course. So if Cheryl was with me on this, she would have done a picture which looks a bit like mine, but just like hers. You know, Jim's going to be with me in a few weeks' time in upstate New York, and we'll be doing, you know, American scenes, and they're going to look just like Jim's. Last week, Elizabeth was with me and Julian was with me, and their work looked just like theirs. You know, it didn't look like mine. It was theirs, but it's influenced by mine because I'm teaching them and I'm showing them the subject matter and the process. So style doesn't really come into it. Style is something you can maybe see at the end, and it kind of looks a bit similar, but I never mention style. I don't think I ever mention style in a workshop. And if I do, then you can tell me off.
Keith also asked, do you see your style developing further, and what new directions do you think you will explore?
Yeah, I think it probably will if I can go to some different places, some new places. So maybe, you know, Southeast Asia, you know, perhaps Vietnam, Thailand, those sort of places, like other places, lots of other places in America I'd love to go to. So I think the style would probably naturally change. Maybe I might go down the route of perhaps putting less colour in and go back to more black, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking to push things. I'm not conscious of wanting to change the style, but I'm always looking for, you know, new shapes and new stories and new ways of expressing myself. Yeah. So this is an example of, again, this is out in America. This is New Mexico now, and this is really trying to capture that expanse, that huge, big open space. And the way to do it is you stick nothing in the picture. Now, if I went back, say, 5 years ago, I would not have the confidence to do this. I wouldn't have had the understanding to do it. So just using that white of the paper as a real positive is something that I personally have learned over the years. I've just read what Cheryl's put there. Would you, Rebecca, can you read that out for me?
Yeah, Cheryl said, I love this one. It looks great in my dining room. I guess Cheryl thought the original, not just.
Yeah. Yeah, she hasn't got the real tree now, she's got the real picture. It's so funny. Right, let's move on. Sorry, go on, Kayla, go on.
Renati has asked, how does local weather influence your paintings? What do you do in hot weather, for example?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, obviously the conditions are going to affect you all the time. So if you're somewhere really, really hot, you've got to make sure you find shade. You can't be out in direct sunlight. But if it is really hot, it's going to make the paints dry a lot quicker as well. And if you're somewhere really, really cold, you just get miserable and you want to give up. So I think the weather is a huge, big factor. And from a practical point of view, you've got to make sure that people aren't getting too cold or too wet or too hot. And as Elizabeth said, you sit under an umbrella or under a bridge. Okay, now this is another one, house in New Mexico. This is a place called Ghost Ranch. And this is me using colour in kind of like a really kind of powerful, almost subjective way, because this cobalt turquoise didn't really exist in the scene, but I invented it, or I applied it to the picture because I was so influenced by all the wonderful cobalt turquoise jewelry that I'd seen in New Mexico. So it kind of really, I was really inspired by seeing this particular colour in jewelry, in necklaces and earrings and things. And I just wanted to stick it into a landscape. So it just kind of shows that inspiration can come from all sorts of different directions. And then this is last year, so we're up to 2023 now. Okay, and Anya was with me on this one. So this is Bamberg, and this is kind of like pushing, I think, the colour in a very expressive, dramatic kind of way. Using a whole range of colours. There's probably about 4 or 5 colours here, but really using them in a very powerful kind of way. But I think it's still got that balance between the drawing and the colour. So it's quite unusual it's quite different compared to some of the earlier ones we saw where the black and the grey dominated a lot more. I feel with this, the grey and the black are there, but they're sitting alongside the colour, and there's a really nice balance between the two. So this is kind of me arriving at where I am now, and I think everything's kind of coming together, the patterning, the playfulness, the composition, the subject itself, but I think in particular the use of colour. And this is the final one. This is the last one. And this is Hector. And Hector was my subject in Morocco last year. So I was in Morocco last October, and he was the final workshop sketch that I did. And the reason that I've chosen Hector as the last one is because I've got a story to do with Hector in my new book. So I'm going to finish off by reading you a story. Okay. So this was in Marrakesh, and it was last year. So I did lots of preparation for my trip to Morocco, and I was really excited to be going. I'd spent some time studying and practicing Arabic patterns and designs, and I'd researched the main attractions like the mosque and the palaces and spent hours on Google Street View to try and orientate my way around Medina. I was inspired and ready to get started, and I'd also picked up some local knowledge that there was a Burger King in town. So on the first day, we sketched the Koutoubia Mosque. This is the tallest building in Marrakesh and by far the grandest. It's set in beautiful formal gardens with palm trees and shrubs, and I chose a view that included a fountain covered in tiles. I wanted to combine the stylized patterns across the whole sketch and include them in the mosque, the palm trees and the fountain. So it was a way of unifying the different elements, but also referencing the Arabic patterns that are found throughout the city. Also, as it was the first day, it felt appropriate to focus on a major building because it was a way of saying, we're here. The next day, I become more familiar with the city, and in particular the souks, with its cluster of vibrant shops and narrow passageways meandering off in different directions. So I sketched the carpet shop, something simpler and more ordinary. There are carpets hanging on the walls outside, which provided another opportunity to reference the beautiful patterns and colours which are typical of Marrakesh. I also sketched the owner, Mohammed, who was sitting on a chair in the street nearby having his shoes shined. He said, I'm a very important person. Lots of people know me around here, and I sell beautiful rugs. And his rugs were beautiful, but I don't think he was too pleased with the sketch. The following day, I chose a spice shop in the Casbah area for our workshop. The owner was called Saeed, which means happy one, and his face lit up when I asked him if I could sketch him. He sold cumin, cardamom, cinnamon, peppers, saffron, and much more. He was very proud of his shop, and we chatted while I sketched, and he was full of optimism for the day. Today will be a good day and I will sell lots of tea and spices, he told me. On the final day, we stumbled across a small square and we met Ali, who owned a donkey. We asked if he would sketch his donkey for a short while. He looked puzzled but agreed. So we were introduced to Hector. Hector had lived and worked in Marrakesh for over 25 years, and I think he was pleased to be our model. He seemed to enjoy the attention. Just standing and doing nothing was probably an easy day compared to others. Ali explained that Hector spends most days pulling his cart full of wood and bricks along the narrow streets. He works hard, but is well looked after. Hector kept fairly still while we drew him. He sometimes moved around and shuffled on his hooves, and after a while we could see him getting restless. After about 20 minutes, Ali kindly took him for a short wander around the square to stretch his legs and then brought him back. When another donkey walked past pulling a cart, Hector got a bit agitated and started shouting. The other donkey shouted back, and we discovered he was Hector's friend and they were pleased to see each other. The other donkey's name was Boris, which I think is a great name for a donkey. When I arrived in Marrakesh, I planned to sketch grand buildings with lots of Islamic patterns. I then discovered the brightly coloured shops in the souks and found inspiration in the more ordinary scenes. I then sketched the shop owners who shared their stories with me. And finally, I met Hector, who was such an integral part of the city. Sketching him felt like a positive conclusion to a creative journey which started with the big postcard view and then through peeling back the layers of understanding, stumbled upon an ordinary donkey in a small square. Something that might easily go unnoticed and far removed from a mosque in a formal gardens, but something with a much more personal and interesting story to tell. And that's what it's all about, guys. It's all about sketching stories. And there's no style in stories, just lots and lots and lots of looking and understanding, making friends, feeling good about the space that you're in, living in the moment, forgetting about all the worries and all the crap that can be going on in the world at the moment, and just working your way towards the end of a sketchbook. And it's a wonderful thing to do. So that's my sketching story over the last 10 years. And I hope you've enjoyed it.
We've had a question come through. Sorry, Rebecca. Do you want to go?
No,
it says, are you carrying a small sketchbook with you so you can do small sketches when you have short moments, or do you sketch exclusively on big pages?
So I'm going off to America on Thursday, and I'm going to be with Madeline Island next week in Bar Harbor. So I'll have two sketchbooks. I'll have my big A3 Fabriano sketchbook, which is what a lot of these have been drawn on. And I'll also have a small sketchbook for the pre-sketches, which is kind of A4 in size. So I have the two. So if I'm doing quick drawings, it's just really for me to help the students and to show the students. It's not for me to kind of like warm up or do my own thing. It's always driven by what I need to do in order to help the students to kind of understand what's going on.
Carolyn also asks, your colour is so clean and fresh. Do you mix it on the paper dry or wet?
Yeah, pretty much everything is mixed on the paper. Yes, yeah, so on this particular one that we can see of Hector, most of the colouring would have been done on the page. Sometimes if I'm using complementaries, like say ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, or perhaps orange and cerulean, I'll kind of mix them on the tray and then add some white, but then that will then sit alongside the pure colour to give that lovely warm complementary effect. But most of it's done on the page. Yeah, if you start mixing on the tray, it'll pick up other colours and it'll start getting really dirty.
And the final question I'm going to ask you is from Dave, who says, when we're all sat here in 10 years time reflecting once more, what will be the biggest change?
It's a great question. What will be the biggest change?
Other than being hairdo.
Oh my goodness, I don't know. That's hopefully it'll get better. Hopefully I'll learn perspective properly and stop messing around with colours, and hopefully they'll look a bit more realistic. don't know. I mean, it's always going to be driven by subjects. That's, you know, all I'm ever doing is looking for new shapes and colours. So it will just be driven by that. You know, I could never have imagined, you know, 2 years ago, I would have drawn Hector, and Hector would have been on the front cover of my book called Sketching Stories. So you never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much to everyone who has joined us. Thank you for your patience as well. I know we were a bit late starting. Thank you to our wonderful Plus guys. If you all want to give us a wave, say hello to everyone over on YouTube. You guys are superb. If anyone likes any more information on courses, you can go to urbansketchcourse.com. Any of Ian's upcoming holidays will be over on ianfennelly.co.uk. But thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope to see you again.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kayla. And thanks to all our lovely urban sketching friends all over the world for joining in. I took a bit longer than I imagined, didn't I? I talked far too much.